The grand hall at the New York Public Library buzzed with energy. Business leaders, students, and parents filled the venue, eager to hear from one of the most polarizing yet undeniably successful figures in modern history, Donald J. Trump. The former president, billionaire, and real estate mogul had been invited to give a talk on success. Among the crowd sat a little girl, no older than 10, her blonde hair neatly tied in a ponytail. She clutched a notepad against her chest as her mother whispered something into her ear. The girl's name was Emily, a bright and curious child who had been dreaming of this moment ever since her mother told her she'd get to meet Trump in person. Trump took to the stage, his presence commanding. He adjusted his signature red tie, gazed at the audience, and with his usual charisma, said, "Success isn't given, folks. It's earned. Through hard work, belief, and never, ever giving up." The speech continued for nearly an hour, filled with stories from his days in real estate, the lessons he learned in business, and how he handled challenges in the political arena. The audience nodded, applauded, and even laughed at his witty remarks. When the Q&A session began, many hands shot up. Businessmen wanted to know his opinions on the market. Entrepreneurs asked about investments. College students questioned him about leadership. But then, a small, trembling hand went up. Trump's sharp eyes caught it immediately. "Yes, young lady," he said, pointing at Emily. "What's your question?" Emily took a deep breath. Her voice was small but clear. "Mr. Trump, what does it really take to be successful? And do you think someone like me can ever be as successful as you?" The audience fell silent. Trump tilted his head slightly. Something about her question seemed to strike him. For a moment he didn't speak. And when he finally did, his voice was softer than before. "That," he said, "is a very important question." The room leaned in, waiting. No one could have predicted that his next words would change Emily's life forever. The room remained silent as Donald Trump stared at the little girl. The usual bravado in his voice softened, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. "Success," he finally said, "isn't just about money or power. It's about knowing who you are, believing in yourself when no one else does, and pushing forward no matter how many times you get knocked down." Emily's eyes widened. She was only 10, but she understood the weight of those words. Trump continued, stepping forward slightly. "I wasn't always successful, you know? People look at me and see the buildings, the name, the business, the presidency, but they don't see the struggles. They don't see the times I failed, the times people laughed at me, the times I lost everything." Emily's grip tightened on her notepad. "You lost everything?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Trump nodded. "More than once. There was a time in the 1990s when I was billions of dollars in debt. Reporters were calling me a joke, a failure. I walked past a homeless man on the street one day and realized he was richer than me, because he had nothing, and I had less than nothing." A murmur went through the audience. Even those who had followed Trump's career closely knew this was a rare moment of vulnerability. "But I didn't quit," Trump said. His voice grew stronger. "I fought back. I made deals, I took risks, and I built myself up again. Because that's what winners do. They don't sit around crying about what's fair and unfair. They get up and fight." Emily swallowed hard. She had never thought about success in that way before. "So," Trump said, fixing his gaze on her, "do I think you can be successful? Absolutely. But you have to want it more than anything. More than comfort, more than sleep, more than the fear of failure. And you have to be willing to work for it." Emily's hands trembled as she wrote something in her notepad. Then, before she could think, she blurted out, "But what if I'm afraid?" Trump took a deep breath, then smiled slightly. "Then you're human. But the real question is, are you more afraid of failing or more afraid of never trying?" Emily felt her chest tighten. No one had ever asked her that before. The audience, now completely invested in this conversation, waited for her response. She hesitated, then whispered, "I think I'm more afraid of never trying." Trump's face lit up. "Then, my dear, you've already taken the first step to success." A hush fell over the room. People weren't just listening to a businessman's speech anymore. They were witnessing a moment of profound truth between a little girl and a man who had built an empire. Emily had no idea that her simple question had set the stage for something much bigger. The entire room remained captivated. No one checked their phones. No one whispered among themselves. All eyes were on Donald Trump and the little girl who had just confessed her fear of never trying. Trump nodded approvingly. That's good. That's really good. Because fear of failure is what stops most people from even starting. But the fear of not trying, that's the kind of fear that makes champions. Emily's lips parted slightly. Champions. She liked the sound of that. Trump took a few steps across the stage, his voice carrying authority. You know, Emily, when I was younger, people told me I was crazy for dreaming big. They said I'd never make it, that I was just another rich kid who'd lose everything. He let out a small chuckle. Even when I ran for president, people laughed at me. They said I had no chance, that I didn't belong in politics. But guess what? Emily swallowed. You won. That's right, Trump said, pointing at her. Because I didn't listen to them. I listened to me. A few heads in the audience nodded. Some whispered in agreement. Others simply absorbed his words in silence. Trump folded his arms. But let me tell you something. Success isn't just about ignoring the doubters. It's about proving them wrong. It's about showing them that no matter how hard they try to bring you down, you'll rise even higher. Emily's tiny fingers gripped her notepad. She felt something stir inside her. A kind of determination she had never felt before. But, Mr. Trump, she said hesitantly, what if people don't believe in me? What if they tell me I can't do it? Trump's face grew serious. Then you smile at them, work twice as hard, and let your success do the talking. The room erupted in applause. Emily blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected her question to cause such a reaction. She felt a lump form in her throat, and she quickly looked down at her notepad, scribbling furiously. Trump watched her for a moment, then continued. Listen, Emily, the world isn't always fair. There will be people who try to stop you. People who tell you you're not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. He leaned forward slightly. But do you know what I've learned? The only person who can decide your success is you. Emily bit her lip. But what if I fail? Trump grinned. Then you get back up. A silence stretched between them. Emily nodded slowly, as if letting the words sink in. Trump then did something unexpected. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a gold-plated pen with his name engraved on it. He held it up for the audience to see before walking over to the edge of the stage, motioning for Emily to come closer. With hesitant steps, she approached. Trump leaned down and handed her the pen. This, he said, is the same kind of pen I've used to sign billion-dollar deals, presidential orders, and agreements with world leaders. But do you know what this pen really is? Emily shook her head, wide-eyed. This pen, Trump said, placing it in her small hands, is just a tool, just like any other pen. What matters isn't the pen itself, but what you choose to write with it. Emily looked at the pen in her hands, her breath catching in her throat. You get to decide your story, Emily, Trump said, his voice softer now. So tell me, what are you going to write? A single tear slipped down her cheek. The audience watched in complete silence, some with glistening eyes, as Emily clutched the pen and whispered, something great. Trump gave her a firm nod. That's the spirit. And with that, something in Emily's heart changed forever. Emily stood frozen, clutching the golden pen in her small hands. It felt heavier than she had expected, not just in weight, but in meaning. The words Donald Trump had spoken echoed in her mind. What matters isn't the pen itself, but what you choose to write with it. The audience watched in anticipation. Some people were smiling, others seemed deep in thought. Even the business executives, who had come expecting financial wisdom, found themselves drawn into this unexpected exchange between a billionaire and a little girl. Trump straightened up, looking at Emily with something resembling admiration. Now, here's the thing about success, he continued. It's not just about working hard, it's about having a vision. You have to see where you're going, even when no one else does. Emily nodded, wiping the tear from her cheek. Trump smirked slightly. So, Emily, what's your vision? What do you want to do? Emily hesitated, her fingers still gripping the pen. Then, taking a deep breath, she said, I want to be a writer. A murmur went through the crowd. Trump raised an eyebrow. A writer, huh? That's a tough business. Lots of people will tell you it's impossible, that you can't make a living from it, that you'll never be successful. Emily swallowed hard. She had already heard those things before. Even her teacher had once told her that writing was just a hobby, not a career. Trump leaned in slightly. But let me tell you something, Emily. Do you think I listened when people told me I'd never succeed? She shook her head. Exactly, Trump said firmly. If you want to be a writer, then be a writer. But don't just talk about it. Do it. Every single day. Emily's heart pounded. Trump gestured toward her notepad. You already have everything you need to start. The ideas are in your head. The words are in your heart. And now, you have the tool to put them on paper. Emily looked down at the pen again. But here's the catch, Trump added, folding his arms. Success doesn't come from just dreaming. It comes from action, from discipline, from writing when you don't feel like it, from working on your craft when others are playing games or wasting time. Emily's grip tightened on the notepad. She had never thought about success like that before. She had always imagined it was something that just happened to lucky people. Trump's voice softened. If you want it bad enough, Emily, nothing can stop you. Not the doubters, not the failures, not even your own fears. Emily met his gaze. But what if I don't know where to start? Trump chuckled. Start by making a promise. A promise? She repeated. Yes. Trump nodded. A promise to yourself. That no matter what happens, no matter how hard it gets, you won't quit. That you'll keep writing, keep learning, keep pushing forward, even when no one is watching. Emily's throat tightened. The weight of his words settled deep inside her. Trump took a step back and gestured to the crowd. You see, folks, success isn't just about money or fame. It's about resilience, about believing in yourself when no one else does. Emily here, he pointed at her. She's already ahead of most adults. Why? Because she's asking the right questions. Emily felt her cheeks flush. Trump turned back to her. So, Emily, do you promise? She blinked up at him. Then, with a newfound determination, she nodded. I promise. Trump smiled. Good, because that's how success begins. The audience erupted into applause. Some people stood, clapping with admiration. A few even wiped away tears. Emily, overwhelmed by the moment, clutched the golden pen tightly, knowing that she had just made a promise that would change her life forever. The applause thundered through the grand hall, but Emily barely heard it. Her mind was spinning. Just minutes ago, she had asked Donald Trump a simple question about success. Now, she was standing in front of hundreds of people, making a promise to herself, and to one of the most influential men in the world. Trump let the applause die down before speaking again. Now, here's what's going to happen, Emily. His voice was firm but encouraging. You're going to go home tonight, take out this pen, and write something. Anything. A story, a journal entry, a plan. But you're going to start. Emily nodded, her fingers wrapped tightly around the golden pen. Trump continued, because success doesn't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't care if you're ready or not. It comes to those who take action. Emily felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubbling inside her. Trump smirked slightly. And I'll let you in on a little secret, Emily. Most people don't take action. They talk about what they want to do, but they never actually do it. That's why so few people truly succeed. The audience murmured in agreement. Trump turned back to Emily. But you're different. You didn't just sit there listening to the speech. You raised your hand. You asked the question. You took the first step. Emily's chest swelled with pride. Trump nodded toward her mother, who was watching with tear-filled eyes. Your mom is proud of you. I can see it. And I want you to remember something. No matter how successful you become, never forget the people who believe in you. Emily glanced at her mother, who smiled through her tears. Trump straightened his tie. Now, I have a challenge for you, Emily. Emily blinked. A challenge? That's right. Trump folded his arms. I want you to write a story, something that inspires people, something that makes them believe in themselves the way you're starting to believe in yourself. Emily's eyes widened. And when you're done, Trump added, I want you to send it to me. The entire room gasped. Emily felt her heart stop. Send it to you? Trump nodded. That's right. I don't just hand out my pens, Emily. I expect results. The weight of the challenge pressed down on her. This wasn't just a motivational speech anymore. This was real. A real challenge from a real billionaire. Emily swallowed hard, but then she remembered something he had just said. Most people don't take action, and she had just promised him and herself that she wouldn't be like most people. She straightened her back, looked Trump in the eye, and nodded. I'll do it. Trump smiled. That's what I like to hear. The audience burst into applause again. Some were cheering, others clapping in admiration. Emily's mother hugged her tightly, whispering, I'm so proud of you. Trump turned back to the crowd. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret to success. He pointed at Emily. It starts with a decision to take action. The audience erupted into a standing ovation. Emily's heart pounded. This wasn't just a speech anymore. This was her moment. And for the first time in her life, she truly believed she was going to do something great. The applause slowly faded, but Emily's heart was still racing. As she held the golden pen tightly in her hand, she felt the weight of the promise she had just made. Not just to Donald Trump, but to herself. Trump gave her one last nod before stepping back to address the crowd. You see, folks, success isn't about age, background, or luck. It's about making decisions and taking action. He gestured toward Emily. This little girl just made a decision. Now, let's see how many of you are brave enough to do the same. The audience erupted into murmurs. Some people nodded in agreement while others looked thoughtful. Emily felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see her mother, tears glistening in her eyes. Emily, you were incredible, she whispered. Emily swallowed hard, still overwhelmed. I can't believe that just happened. Her mother smiled. Believe it. And now you have a story to write. Emily's mind spun. What kind of story could she write that would be worthy of this moment? Of Trump's challenge? As Trump finished his speech and the event wrapped up, people came up to Emily, congratulating her, shaking her hand, telling her how inspired they were. Some business professionals even handed her their business cards, saying they wanted to read her story when it was done. Emily felt like she was in a dream, but as she and her mother left the grand hall and stepped into the cool night air, reality hit her like a ton of bricks. She had made a promise, and she had no idea where to start. That night, Emily sat at her desk, staring at a blank page. The golden pen gleamed under the light, waiting for her to use it. But her hands trembled. What if my story isn't good enough? She thought. What if I fail? She sighed and looked around her small bedroom. On her bookshelf sat a row of her favorite books. Stories that had made her laugh, cry, and dream. Then she remembered Trump's words, most people don't take action. And suddenly, she knew what she had to do. She picked up the pen, took a deep breath, and wrote the first words of her story. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted to change the world. Her journey had begun. Emily stared at the words she had just written. The ink from the golden pen shimmered slightly under the lamp's glow. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted to change the world. She had written the first sentence. But now what? Her heart pounded. What if her story wasn't good enough? What if Trump read it and thought it was silly? Her fingers hovered over the page, paralyzed. The weight of the challenge, the fact that she had promised not just herself but Donald Trump, felt heavier than she had expected. She let out a shaky breath and looked toward her bedroom window. The city lights flickered in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were chasing their dreams, building businesses, writing books, creating things that mattered. And she? She was just a little girl with a golden pen and a blank page. Emily shut her notebook with frustration. Maybe I'm not ready for this. She slumped onto her bed, staring at the ceiling. The excitement of the day had drained into self-doubt. But then, her mother's voice drifted in from the hallway. Emily, honey, you okay? Emily hesitated. Then, quietly, she said, Mom, what if I can't do this? Her mother appeared in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. She walked over and sat on the bed beside Emily, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sweetheart, do you remember the first time you learned to ride a bike? Emily frowned. Yeah. And do you remember how scared you were? Emily nodded. I thought I'd fall. Her mother smiled. And you did fall. A few times. But did you give up? Emily shook her head. No, her mother said softly. Because you wanted it. And the only way to learn was to keep trying. Emily sat up slowly, her mother's words sinking in. I know this feels big, her mother continued, but you don't have to write the perfect story tonight. You just have to start. Emily swallowed hard. Trump's voice echoed in her mind. Success comes to those who take action. She looked at her notebook. Then she reached for the golden pen. Her mother kissed her forehead. I believe in you, sweetheart. As she left the room, Emily took a deep breath and opened her notebook again. She reread the first sentence. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who wanted to change the world. This time, she didn't hesitate. She started writing. Word after word, sentence after sentence. She poured her heart onto the page. She wrote about a girl who faced obstacles. A girl who was told she couldn't succeed, but who refused to give up. A girl who fought for her dreams, even when others doubted her. She didn't stop to think if it was good enough. She just wrote. And for the first time, she understood something powerful. Success didn't come from being fearless. It came from acting despite the fear. And she was ready to act. Emily's hand moved quickly across the page. The golden pen felt warm in her grasp, as if it carried some kind of magic. She lost track of time. Word after word, she built a world, a journey, a dream. The little girl in her story wasn't just a character. She was Emily herself, transformed into something greater. The girl in the story faced rejection. People told her she was too young, too small, too inexperienced to make a difference. But she didn't listen. She worked harder. She wrote even when her hands were tired. She believed in herself even when no one else did. Emily paused, staring at the words she had written. She thought about Donald Trump's challenge. She thought about his voice, strong and unwavering. Most people don't take action. She had taken action. She had written something. But was it good enough? Her chest tightened. She glanced at the clock. 1:37 a.m. She had written for nearly 3 hours without realizing it. Emily exhaled, suddenly exhausted. She looked at the pages filled with her handwriting, 3, 4, 5 full pages of words. Her heart pounded. She had done it. She had started. She didn't know if it was perfect. She didn't know if it was something that would impress Trump. But she had taken the first step. And for the first time since leaving the event, she felt something deeper than excitement. She felt proud. The next morning, Emily woke up with her notebook still open beside her. Sunlight streamed through her window, illuminating the golden pen. She stretched, rubbed her eyes, and sat up. Her mother walked into the room, smiling. Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep well? Emily yawned. I think so. Her mother glanced at the notebook. Did you write something? Emily hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I did. Her mother's smile widened. I'm so proud of you. Emily swallowed, staring at the pages she had filled. Then, without thinking, she blurted out, Do you think it's good enough to send to Mr. Trump? Her mother sat on the bed beside her and gently picked up the notebook, flipping through the pages. She read quietly. Emily held her breath. Finally, her mother looked up and met Emily's gaze. Honey, she said softly, this is your story, and I think it's exactly what Mr. Trump would want to see. Emily's heart swelled. She wasn't sure what Trump would say when he read it. But she knew one thing for certain. She was going to send it anyway. Because success wasn't about waiting for perfection. It was about taking action. And she was ready for whatever happened next. Emily sat at the kitchen table, staring at her notebook. Her mother had set up the laptop in front of her, ready to type the story into an email. But Emily's hands were frozen. The golden pen lay beside the notebook, glinting under the morning light. Her mother sat across from her, watching patiently. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emily bit her lip. "What if he doesn't like it?" Her mother tilted her head. "What did Mr. Trump say about success?" Emily hesitated, then repeated the words that had been echoing in her mind for the past 24 hours. Success doesn't come from being fearless. It comes from acting despite the fear. Her mother nodded. "So what are you going to do?" Emily swallowed hard. Then, with a deep breath, she opened the laptop and started typing. It took her an hour to carefully type out her handwritten story. She double-checked every word, making sure it captured what she truly wanted to say. Then came the hardest part, writing the email. She kept it short and to the point. Subject: "Thank you for the challenge. Here's my story, dear Mr. Trump. My name is Emily, and I was the little girl who asked you about success at the event in New York. You gave me a challenge, and I promised I would take action. Attached is my story. It's about a girl who faces obstacles but never gives up, no matter how many people doubt her. She keeps going because she believes in herself. I don't know if it's perfect, but I do know that I kept my promise. Thank you for inspiring me. Sincerely, Emily." Her hands trembled as she clicked "Attach" and uploaded the document. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Then, before she could second-guess herself, she pressed send. It was done. A rush of emotions flooded her. Relief, nervousness, excitement. Her mother squeezed her hand. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." Emily exhaled. She had done it. She had sent her story to one of the most famous men in the world. Now all she could do was wait. 3 days passed. Emily checked her email every morning, hoping for a response. Nothing. By the 5th day, she started to wonder if Trump had even read it. Maybe he got too many emails. Maybe he didn't have time for a little girl's story. Doubt crept in. But then, on the 7th day, something happened that Emily never expected. An email arrived. The sender? Donald J. Trump. Emily gasped so loudly that her mother rushed over. "What is it?" Emily pointed at the screen, unable to speak. Her mother's eyes widened. "Oh my goodness!" With a deep breath, Emily clicked the email open. And what she read made her heart stop. Emily's eyes raced across the screen as she read the email. "Dear Emily, I remember you from the event. You were the young lady who asked a very important question about success. And now, you've done something that most people never do. You took action. That alone makes you different. I read your story. It's inspiring, just like you. You understand something that even many adults don't. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about pushing forward no matter what. You have talent, Emily. But more importantly, you have determination. And that is what makes winners. Never stop writing. Never stop believing in yourself. And never let anyone tell you that you can't achieve something great. Remember, the only limits are the ones you accept. I'm proud of you. Best, Donald J. Trump." Emily's hands trembled as she finished reading. She couldn't breathe. He wrote back," she whispered. Her mother hugged her tightly. "He read your story, Emily. And he believes in you." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes. She wasn't just some little girl with a dream anymore. She was someone who had been recognized by a billionaire, a former president, a man who had built an empire. And he believed in her. She looked down at the golden pen resting on the table. It wasn't just a pen. It was a symbol, a reminder that she was capable of more than she ever thought possible. She wiped her tears and turned back to her notebook. Because this wasn't the end of her story. It was just the beginning.